Camille Paglia has been a polarizing figure in academic circles. I've always admired her. I think she's smart as a whip, tough as nails, but I could see why she would rub some people the wrong way. She's a very abrasive personality. She doesn't hold punches. One thing I want to clear up, I guess, is that I'm not really a fan of this critique of her as a pseudo-intellectual. I don't think there's anything pseudo about her intellect. Just because she doesn't couch her ideas in the trappings of kind of the jargon of academia, and she's basically saying the same thing as people like Hélène Cixous and Irigaray and Kristeva, the big three French feminists. She's talking about sexual difference, that there is a fundamental difference, probably more for kind of psychological as opposed to biological reasons, between men and women. She's also saying really the same thing as someone like Carol Gilligan, who I think expresses this in a much more kind and gentle way, so it makes it more palatable to people. Basically she's talking about the yin and the yang, that women, not all women, but the feminine, let's put it, is the more receptive pole, whereas the masculine is the more active and, uncompromising pole. And it's not that one is better or worse than the other, and it's not, that these are essences that apply to every single man and every single woman. It's just that it seems like, for probably a combination of biological and psychological reasons, these are the roles that the genders have. And again, it crosses over to some extent. There's complications based upon sexual preference as well, and that type of thing. But the reason I've been thinking about this lately is my own difficulties in relationships, because growing up in a very kind of traditional, conservative household, relatively speaking, especially in the U.S., I think I've kind of imbibed a lot of these ideas about these traditional roles. And again, I don't think I've done this unreflectively. I just think that there seems to be something to this division of labor, so to speak. Women are more nurturing, generally speaking, than men. Not across the board, but generally speaking. And this makes sense on a lot of levels. I mean, women are the ones who give birth, create life out of their own bodies, and end up, and these days the formula maybe not so much, but they give life and sustain the life of the child, feeding the child out of her own body. Whereas men, as someone like Carol Gilligan emphasizes, they've always identified more with this sense of independence, whereas women, their identity is tied up more in terms of relationships. It's not an accident that across most cultures, it's the woman who takes the man's name in marriage. At most maybe she maintains her own maiden name, so to speak, but it's almost unheard of for the man to take the woman's name. And or to take another example, if you watch Dancing with the Stars, I don't, but I know of this through osmosis. The men take the lead in these dances, and the women respond. And again, this isn't true across the board. This isn't a limitation in terms of essence. I think this is one of the reasons people like Camille Paglia she's so controversial, because people immediately charge her with essentialism, saying that this is kind of a regression to the June Cleaver days of the 50s or something like that. Obviously, the gains women have made economically, especially in the West, they've been a great thing by and large. The oppression that women have suffered through most of human history is horrible. But at the same time, I think, especially combined with, this is something I've written on and thought about extensively, this combined with the kind of heightened eroticism that as attached to women today. If you just just perusing media, I think it makes sense that a more conservative culture or ideology, take fundamentalist Islam for example, would take pains to cover women up, and obviously I think, well, at least that this is way too extreme, but once you eroticize women to the extent that we have today in our culture, that power, that erotic power that women have, at least in their youth, coupled with their newfound economic power, has kind of tipped the scales maybe too far in the other direction, and led to real difficulties in kind of navigating relationships nowadays. I think it's great that men have to take a more active role in raising kids and household duties and that type of thing. But at the same time, to forget these roles, to think that there is no difference whatsoever, kind of what the first wave of feminism, people like Simone de Beauvoir emphasized, probably based on her existentialist philosophy, that we're completely free to determine our own identities, that type of idea. I think that's just empirically false, and that attitude, I think, leads to problems and in relationships individually and generally in terms of culture. Not to say that I want to go back to the days of June Cleaver, but I think when you talk about like conservative Republicans championing family values and that type of thing, again, that probably goes too far, but there's something to that, and to just neglect it altogether and to just dismiss people like Camille Paglia just because they find what she's saying abrasive, I think is just I don't know, silly, really, for lack of a better word. Let's take what people have to say seriously, even if they say it maybe in not the most diplomatic ways, and think about it and see if we can alleviate the misery created by people's egos going wild when they think that they're all of that, whether man or woman, and think that they know the right way to do things, and who's anyone else to tell them or take the lead in a situation where maybe sometimes a man or a woman should kind of fall back and recognize that someone belongs in that position, and let that ego be diminished, and so that we can all get along better and lessen the pain and suffering in the world. All right, I think that's it. Thanks. Bye.